I await news of a potentially life-threatening, dire medical diagnosis, I thought, why not, instead of lying in bed thinking about my impending doom, why not, outline a novel with solo RPG? Might be a better use of my creative energies, maybe?
This is not the video that I had originally planned. A little while ago, I had an idea for a video where I would create a novel outline using solo RPG, and I would do it within 7 days as sort of a challenge for a YouTube video. Just when I started to plan and work on that video, I got a call from my doctor. He wanted me to come in right away to discuss the pelvic ultrasound results that I had literally just had that day, and he wanted me to come in immediately. So the next afternoon, I managed to go in, and he sat me down, and he said, "They think you might have cancer. Not just you have cancer, they think you might have cancer." It turned out there were some very large suspicious masses on my ovaries. Like, one of them was 11 centimeters large. No ovarian tissue demonstrated. And any quick Google search will tell you ovarian cancer, endometrial cancer, gynecological cancers don't always have the best prognosis, especially if they're caught too late. I went in for more tests, and while I waited for a referral to the Tom Baker Center here in Calgary, I decided that I needed to take all of the nervous energy of might having cancer and put it into a creative project. I'd had this idea for a mermaid book back at the beginning of the pandemic, and I really wanted to use that book to create an outline for.
To be honest, I really hoped that this novel could be a Kickstarter that I would do, but just with everything that is kind of going on right now in my personal life, I don't even know if that's gonna happen ever. So I'm just trying, I don't wanna scare people, I'm just trying to be realistic and try and prioritize things that matter, and also just try and focus on something other than all the phone calls that I'm hoping to get this week while I kind of do this project.
Have other projects on the go. If you're a fan of me, you're waiting for like the 5th book in my sci-fi series, that I needed to work on something that was for me. I had to work on something that no one was expecting or waiting for, because there was a real possibility that I would not live to write this book, or any other book, or anything. It is impossible for me to separate talking about my health and my creative projects. If you're a creator, you know that feeling good is a prerequisite to creating. If you don't feel good physically or mentally, you're not gonna wanna sit down and do the work. So while this video is about creating a novel outline, a good novel outline using solo RPG techniques and tools, this video is also about how I did that during not one, but 2 major surgeries, waiting for and receiving an eventual diagnosis, and inevitably, cancer treatments. That might not have been super obvious. I have been posting updates on my Facebook, my personal Facebook profile, and only a couple on my Fairy Ink Press socials, and nothing here on YouTube, because I had filmed a lot of stuff earlier in the year, and I was able to do some stuff in between my surgeries, and I've been editing that ever since. I know that's my cancer's not been very visible up until now, which you can obviously see. It's certainly visible now, but I think it's important to talk about it because it's really happening to me, and it could happen to someone you know, or to you. And also, just so you don't spend the whole video wondering and worrying about me, this story does have a happy ending, mostly. I really believe that I'm gonna be okay. I'm receiving some really excellent care here at the Tom Baker. Honestly, I think it's gonna be fine once I am through all of this. But first, let me divert your attention to the criteria I set out to create a successful novel outline with solo RPG. One of the biggest challenges I see writers face when creating an outline or even just writing is, how do I know when I'm done? The best way to combat that is to set out some key results or some criteria so that you will know what done or finished looks like for your writing project. And I mean, that's also good advice for, any kind of goal setting. Doing this beforehand will save you a lot of stress during the process. So here's the criteria that I used for this experiment. So for the past several years, I've been using Libby Hawker's Take Off Your Pants outlining method as described in her book. Leave the link in the description. Now, despite the rude name, it's referring to the pantsers versus plotters? Yeah, that's right. Pantsers who do writing off the seat of their pants and plotters who plot. And I find that her book is a very no-nonsense guide to outlining, and I really recommend it. Which leads me to the first criterion for done, which was have every single subsection of Libby Hawker's template filled in, even if it was just a couple of rough sentences of an idea. I wanted to have something in that place so that I could sketch it out even further later. The second criterion was, does this novel as outlined feel satisfying and whole? Now you might think that's a very nebulous criterion, but it's really a binary yes or no question. If the answer is yes, the story as outlined feels satisfying whole, great. But if the answer is no, that's not necessarily a bad thing either. That's an indication that you have a gap. You need to note where that gap is and at least recognize that it exists. Now, I don't always do all of my world building in the outlining phase. I'm mostly interested in getting the story down, and a story that makes mostly some sense, and then I can identify all the areas where I need to go back and do research and do world building, because I don't want to have that get in the way of me creating the story. The most important thing for me is to get a skeleton going so that I can actually sit down and write the story, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do here. The third criterion is probably the most important, and that is, does this story feel compelling enough to make me want to write it? Again, this is a binary yes, no question, and hopefully the answer at the end of this outlining process is yes, because otherwise I'm not gonna write the book. So with success clearly defined, I was ready to get started.
So I've managed to do about an hour on this today. I've written down all of the major plot points that I want to see in the story, as well as some character notes and ideas. So I've put those all in my template. I feel pretty good about it so far, actually. It's kind of a nice distraction. So I'll check in tomorrow. I'm gonna put in about an hour and a half today on this. I hope I have a couple of questions that I'm going to be focusing on in this session, like who is the best friend character? I'd like to flesh them out. I think it's a girl, but I'm not entirely sure. And I'd like to flesh out some of the, one of the villain's secret motivations. I'd really like to kind of clarify that, and maybe do some very light world building of some of the which is what I'm calling the mermaid culture. At the beginning of the pandemic, I'd had this idea for a mermaid book where
Instead of the mermaid wanting to become human, she is sent to the surface as a punishment for a crime that she'd committed against the mer community. And in order to redeem herself, she would have to perform acts of service to be accepted back into her community. I had conceived this as a 2-book or a 3-book series, with the main through line being her redeeming herself in the eyes of her community, or gaining a soul. And she also commits herself in each book to solving a larger crime committed by humans or what have you. I love combining genres. I turned to solo RPG for outlining and writing because it allowed me to create things even when I wasn't feeling the best. There were systems that I used to fuel and propel my storytelling. They gave me energy when I didn't have any.
And I have already done some preliminary world building for this story, actually with Microscope.
If you're a regular viewer of this channel, it shouldn't be a surprise to you that Microscope is on this list. I started using Microscope to flesh out this world before I even knew what solo RPG was. I realized that I could simulate a second player in Microscope by using Wikipedia random entries and other oracles, which led me to create this high-tech underworld mermaid culture with strange and sometimes heinous connections to the human world. In fact, one of the major antagonist factions that I developed during this time plays a critical role in this novel. I ended up taking my notes from this time and putting them into Utgar's Chronicles and into my Obsidian Vault, and this laid the foundation for the early world building and also some of the early plot points. When I started digging into the plot of this mermaid novel, I realized that I needed a better tool to create socioeconomic conflict. So enter Worlds Without Number. Now, this is a whole RPG system in and of itself, but it also includes a lot of tables for developing your own settings. Rolling on these tables was really fun.
I had kind of an idea where I wanted to go, but I used the Worlds Without Number sort of quick rolling system to get some more specific prompts and ideas for like what's going on right now. And I kind of have fleshed that out. So I think that will be good sort of background candy, kind of good dressing for another character that I ended up making during this session, a secret baddie.
I ended up rolling that my merfolk are bureaucratic and orderly, and that they organize themselves into councils that rule different aspects of the society. These councils are ruled by underkings, which in turn serve a monarchy, which fits because I wanted my protagonist mermaid to be a descendant of the monarchy, but not close enough that she would actually have to rule one day. She's like, you know, 75th in line or something like that. And I wanted to show that there's a lot of red tape in this society. I don't think that my mer protagonist really realizes that until she's in this penal system where she has to serve others and put herself second, something that she's not really used to doing. I could do a whole video on Mythic, and in fact, while filming this video, Mythic 2.0 released. I'm still using Mythic 1.0, and it is fine if you do too. I use the basic structure of Mythic whenever I was creating a new scene. There are 3 different scene types in Mythic. There are expected scenes, altered scenes, and interrupted scenes. An expected scene means that the scene begins how you think it's gonna begin, how you envision it in your mind. Maybe the next logical scene in the progression of story is that you are walking through the woods, or your character arrives at a restaurant. An altered scene means that the scene begins how you believe it's going to begin, but something has been elevated or changed about it. So for example, you're walking through the woods, but it turns out there's a bear and it's gonna chase you. Or you arrive at the restaurant and the friend you were supposed to meet isn't there. An interrupted scene is something completely different than what you expect. So it is not the scene that you have planned, it is not the scene that you have in your mind or have envisioned as happening next. It is something completely random and different. You have to create a whole new scene with a whole new context. For example, in the context of the mermaid novel I outlined, I wanted to create a scene where the mermaid protagonist meets up with her new ally at school. I ended up rolling an interrupted scene, so that meant that she wasn't going to school, she wasn't going to meet her ally and discuss the mystery that they're solving, so I had to create a whole other scene. She's not going to school, where would she be going? Here, I ended up using the Adventure Crafter, which is also created by WordMill. The Adventure Crafter has its own set of rules, which I probably will make a video on at some point. I ended up rolling on the Adventure Crafter that this new interrupt scene would be social in nature and also involve a dense urban setting. This mermaid book is set in a rural hamlet, not unlike the one that I grew up in, and so to me, social plus dense urban setting meant class trip, and specifically class trip to the city. This opened up a lot of new opportunities for my mermaid who is pretending to be a human. While I ended up switching around some of these scenes at the end of the outlining process, creating scenes this way ensures that you're always elevating the stakes and that you're creating different kinds of scenes in different locations to keep things fresh for the story. The Mythic Mystery Matrix was introduced in Mythic magazine and has since been included in the Mythic magazine Volume 1, which is where I got it from. As far as for how this works, I'll leave an in-depth explanation for a future video. But in short, this tool comes with several tables and a matrix for you to fill out as you create your mystery story or campaign. Eventually, your matrix will fill up with some potential suspects, clues, and importantly, the associations between the two. The suspects are assigned points depending on how many implicating associated clues there are. The game tool will ask you to conclude the mystery once the clincher clue is rolled. The guilty party is the one with the most associated clues. But I already knew who the actual villain was, who the real murderer was. So I wasn't playing or using this game tool to discover who the murderer was. I was using it to flesh out the actual mystery itself.
I would say I got about half of the mystery elements, and it's looking pretty dire actually for our main protagonist. She's getting implicated in the mystery. A lot of the evidence is actually pointing to her, and so part of it is her trying to redeem herself, so that fits well with the theme of the story.
So when I rolled the clincher clue signaling the end of the mystery, instead I used it as a low point in the story and a chance to severely implicate my protagonist. But it allows her to show some vulnerability, which also allowed a really great, sweet romance scene between her and her love interest. The story engine is another tool that I've talked a lot about and used a lot on this channel. The story engine deck, if you're not aware, is a deck of 5 different kinds of cards that allows you to quickly and randomly create characters and plots for your stories. I would often pull this out when I needed a quick overview sketch of a character. The story engine was responsible for creating a really unique best friend character in this story. I was not expecting her, but I am really excited about her.
And I drew a story engine card that said she was a parent, but she is a teenager, so I decided that maybe she is a teen mom, or she's pregnant, she's going to be a teen mom. I thought that was kind of interesting, maybe something you don't normally see or have as a character.
She would be able to relate to my mermaid character because both young women have experiences with their bodies undergoing drastic change at such a young age. And I thought it would be a really interesting way to compare and contrast two young women's bodily journeys in this way. Bold is one of my favorite pick-me-up plot and idea generators. It never fails to give me something. I have a whole video already explaining Bold, but basically it generates you a nonsense sentence that you can use to create characters, plot, that you can interpret in the context of your story. I would use this when I didn't have an immediate sense of how the scene would play out. For example, I asked Bold, how does Portia, my protagonist, confront her love interest, Ryan, when she finds out that he has been lying to her this whole time? It generated this nonsense sentence for me. What does that mean, right? Within the context of the story, it means that her resentment towards him grows and grows over the course of several scenes until she can't take it anymore and she just explodes in frustration at him. I decided to structure this by her learning a damning secret about him before they're about to go on this very long day trip where they're investigating a couple of different leads in the mystery, and over these scenes she's very cold towards him. She's trying to decide if she's going to talk to him about this secret that she's learned, and just her frustration just boils up inside her until on the ride home in the vehicle, he's talking about whatever and she just blurts out like, why didn't you tell me about plot point, right? And also this way, they're stuck together on this very long car ride. They have to talk about the secret, or they argue about it, and then it's just really awkward, which again leads to more conflict. So I did a lot of work on this book during a really low point during my cancer journey.
Over the weekend I had a pretty intense CT scan. I was there in the hospital for a couple of hours. So that was pretty tiring. I'm waiting for the results to come in. So hopefully I'll know within the next couple days just how serious this whole medical situation is, because it could be very, very serious. This could be very, very bad.
At this point, I didn't have a cancer diagnosis. I only had suspicious ovarian masses. And I was doing a lot of furious Googling because my differential diagnosis was not good. And yeah, I can tell you that during this time, I really thought I was gonna die. I was told that it was too dangerous to biopsy me because they could rupture a cyst, and in the event that it was cancerous, that could just cause more cancer. So I was told that I would be going directly into surgery, and then from there, they would be able to determine yes, cancer, no cancer. But I was also told, it's probably a cancer. So I was, waiting for a CT scan result that would very literally determine the rest of my life.
I also found out that my CT scan results are in, and after a flurry of activity and phone calls, I'm going to find that out on Friday, so 2 days from now. It is Wednesday today. So yeah, kind of a relief, but also just like want to know the answer. Like, want to know how serious this all is. Just Schrodinger's cancer, basically. Do I have cancer? Do I not have cancer? I don't know. I don't know. Oh, I just want to know.
And the results were good. I had no other visible masses anywhere in my body. And honestly, I cannot express to you how much of a relief that was to me that day, going in there with my husband and getting that confirmation from the doctor, it was a literal wash of relief that I didn't have any kind of potential metastasis. I was so grateful just to be alive and really grateful to be a person who went to the doctor in time. Suddenly, within, a couple of weeks' time, I had gone from, I might die, to, guess what? You're gonna live. Yay! Which also kind of meant that I didn't need this book anymore. I didn't need a creative project to obsessively focus on to dispel the thoughts of like doom. But over the course of several months, I still continued to pick away at this outline.
So just did another session. It took me a couple of days to do just like a 55-minute session because of everything that is going on. But basically I've been doing some research about murder mystery structure, because I haven't, as an adult, written a murder mystery, so I'm trying to add some of that structure into the plot outline, starting to take some of the ideas that I've generated from the solo RPG stuff and trying to fit that into the murder mystery structure. And I think things are really coming together. I have everything in the outline filled in even just a little bit, so that's really exciting. And I think I've resolved, I had two different characters. One was sort of a former best friend character who would betray her, and another character who's sort of looking out for her on the surface, and I think they are one character, so that is a major breakthrough for this session for sure.
Developing an outline using game tools can be really fun, but it's not going to do all of the work for you. You have to realize where the game tools fall short and where you have to use your brain to make all of those juicy connections. Part of creating an outline is realizing where your grand ideas and the plot holes meet to form gaping gaps in the work. And this is where you need to ask questions like, how can I make this work? How can I get character A to place B in a way that makes sense? And sometimes there is not an easy solve for these questions until you actually start writing. And that's okay, you don't have to figure out every single question before you start writing. Otherwise you might never start writing, and then how are others supposed to read your great work, huh? But I at least try to acknowledge my gaps by, number one, using a yes-no oracle like the Mythic Variations 2 oracle to help narrow down some questions or items that might be in the story. Number two, combing through the outline to ensure that I'm not working with older notes or older versions of the outline. And this happens more often than you might think. Keeping your notes organized is very important. I have a whole separate note where I will just dump old ideas just to keep them, just in case I might need them later, but also just to separate them from the actual outline, the stuff that I am working on. Number three, rereading the outline at the beginning of the session so that I have all of the questions and all of the issues clear in my mind, and ensure that any questions that haven't been marked are marked with a clear symbol so I can work on them now or in the future. Number four, for some questions that I have marked as issues, I might remove them temporarily from the outline and put them in a separate document or a separate related note so that I can work them out through a stream of consciousness approach. Because sometimes that's literally the only way that I can think, And number five, some questions you're just not going to be able to answer during the outlining process because it needs more time to solve, or it requires a lot more research than you're really able to get into right now. So I just mark those with a tag and then I move on. Sometimes you just have other pressing issues on your plate. So on July 19th, I had my first major surgery. It was an abdominal surgery. I woke up with a vertical incision, 33 staples holding me together. You know, there's a lot I can say about this part of the journey. When my husband was able to come, he sat next to me and I said, "Was it cancer? Did they find cancer?" And he said, "Well, we're not gonna worry about that right now." Which obviously means, yeah, your body is full of cancer.
So yesterday I finally got back to working on the mermaid book, and I did about an hour on it, and I think some things are really coming together. I was doing some solo RPG stuff, but I was also tying up loose ends, getting to maybe the last third. I just had surgery 2 weeks ago today, and so I haven't worked on the book in a little while. It's really only in the past week that I have even had any brain space to work on anything, and I still get tired pretty easily, but I'm hoping to spend at least an hour on it every couple of days for the next couple weeks as I wait for my official diagnosis.
So during my first surgery, they removed my left ovary, which was basically just a mass of something. They removed my left fallopian tube, my appendix for fun, and a part of my omentum, which is like a fatty-ish tissue that's over the bowels intestine. Anyway, it's a place where cancer can hide if there is cancer. And they couldn't tell whether it was ovarian cancer or endometrial cancer. They were sort of leaning towards endometrial, but they told me it's definitely cancerous. So we have to remove the rest of your stuff, AKA the other ovary, fallopian tube, uterus, cervix. Take them out, boys. That's what I said to them. Just get it all out of there. Unfortunately, this meant a second surgery. So literally 6 weeks after my first major surgery, I was back on the operating table and they were ready with their tools. This time it was not an open abdominal surgery, thank goodness, it was a laparoscopic surgery. So they just go in, they make little cuts, and then they boop, boop, and they stick their tools in like zoop, zoop, and then they go scoop, 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 and then that's how it's done. So this was a shorter surgery, about 2.5 hours or something, instead of like 5 hours. But the recovery was still really difficult. It's still, 4 to 6 weeks recovery. Once again, I was back to square one. I had just learned to get used to my body after having it cut open, and then I had to go back and recover all over again, which became a theme throughout this treatment. You get something done to you and you feel awful, and then you start to feel better, then you start to feel good, and then you're taken right back to the beginning for a different treatment or a different thing. And yeah, this outline took me a really long time. I've written books in 30 days, 30-day novel challenge. I'm a fast writer, and toiling away on something for this long, it's kind of excruciating.
Another session done, finally. It's been about a month since I have worked on this book. I just had my second surgery 2 weeks ago, so I'm feeling pretty tired, but it's good to get back to the book yet again. The outline is actually looking pretty full by this point. There's still a couple of questions that I'm still trying to answer. Pretty excited for the beginning of the third act. I just punched that up today in a really fun way, so I'm really excited for you to see that eventually. I need to still strengthen the villain. That's a big piece that is still missing, so hopefully next session I can do that.
I will say this, despite all of my grumbling and my recovery and my pain, I really did feel better. Like, I cannot express to you enough how much I actually felt better after my first surgery compared to the pain that I was having before surgery. Like, yeah, the pain of recovery, the pain of the incision, etc. Yeah, it sucks, but it was minimal compared to the excruciating pain I was in before the surgery. And also, I finally had mental clarity for the first time in so long. You don't realize how much pain affects you or how much you are in pain until you are not in that pain anymore. I could suddenly think again. I suddenly felt like this weight of sadness, this weight of fear and inadequacy, like that was gone. They had removed a big chunk of the cancer, and with that, I was gifted with energy and clarity, and I finally got what I was looking for, a diagnosis. Even though I knew it was cancer, I really wasn't prepared how the actual diagnosis, final words would affect me. I had stage 3 endometrial cancer. Endometrial cancer is cancer of the uterus. So what happened, basically, I am an atypical case. I had a little itty bitty 2-centimeter tumor in my uterus, which traveled up to my ovaries and feasted on those, and then went to my lymph nodes. And that's why my symptoms were also a little more in line with ovarian cancer, because they had primarily, the growths were on my ovaries. And I didn't really have symptoms of endometrial cancer. The symptoms are so vague. You don't know what it is you might have until you actually get evaluated by someone with expertise. But anyway, this was not easy news to digest. Stage 3 felt very heavy. Like I knew that it wouldn't be stage 1, you know, and I thought maybe stage 2, but I don't think I was mentally prepared for stage 3. Having endometrial cancer also meant that I qualified for an immunotherapy clinical trial that happened to be going on during this time, and I got in just under the wire, and I'm very, very, very grateful that I did. And if you are going through this, please make sure you put your feelers out, talk to your doctors to see if there are any clinical trials going on near you that you are eligible for. So I'm just so, so grateful that I get to be part of this study that will hopefully help other cancer patients receive access to immunotherapy, which is a really exciting area of study and can really make a difference for cancer patients everywhere. I had to wait for them to schedule my chemotherapy appointments. So while I waited, I cut and I donated my hair.
Well, this is a cool look.
Which was about 18 inches. It felt really good to be able to use my hair in that way. And I mean, I was sad to have it go, but it'll grow back. Plus I get to wear these fun wigs, right?
It's the day before I start chemotherapy. I haven't really worked on the book at all. Mostly been learning how to code C# as that's been my distraction, actually. I might work on it a bit today. I really don't know how I will feel during chemotherapy. I feel good now. I feel normal, actually, which sucks. As you can see, I shaved off all of my hair in preparation for chemo, and yeah, so I don't know. I feel kind of nervous, I guess. A little sad, maybe, but I'm ready for it to get started. It's been delayed twice, so.
Chemotherapy affects your whole body, and I was really scared that I would lose my ability to create because of chemotherapy. I was really, really scared that I would go through these 6 rounds and come out the other side less creative, less able to do the things that I'm used to doing, less able to think and calculate and speak. That plus now that my body was no longer producing estrogen, estrogen is important in a lot of different functions. It's not just about reproduction. Estrogen plays a role in your skin and your memory and your communication skills, and not having that ability to create estrogen anymore, I was really, really scared that I wouldn't be able to do the work that I love to do.
So I just did about an hour on the mermaid book today. I'm really excited. I feel like I'm getting back into it. And I know I think I keep saying that, but this time I think for real. And the third act is still a bit of a question mark as far as like the mechanics about how my protagonist is gonna get from point A to point B. But I think some of that is just gonna be solved by going deeper into some of the lore and then seeing what tools emerge that I have to work with. I also think that I need to bulk up the mermaid-esque-ness of it in terms of like her almost getting caught being a mermaid stuff, like going on a trip to the pool and she, you know, shimmers in the water or whatever it is. I need that kind of thing to come out a little bit more in the teen drama stuff. And then I have to bulk up the appearance of my true villain, who is, it's a mystery, so I won't tell you who it is, but I just need to make this villain appear a couple more times throughout the book instead of just kind of appearing a couple times and then at the end. So that needs to be adjusted. I'm feeling pretty good about it. There's parts that are really, really strong. I just have to tweak some of the parts that are not quite as strong. And then, yay. I'm currently doing chemotherapy. I'm feeling some neuropathy in my fingers, but it's fine. And my energy is okay. This is a really good distraction for me right now, so yay. So I think I might be done this outline, actually. Just this morning and last night I had a lot of inspiration and creativity, and while it's not totally sketched out, I think there's enough clear scenes that I have written out that qualify as finished according to the criteria that I laid out at the beginning.
So in the end, my outline ended up being 8,000 words, which is a lot, really more than you would ever need. Included in that outline were dialogue ideas, world building snippets, different ideas for scenes, and also questions. And all of that gets really hard to parse in an endless long scroll. I use a tool called Obsidian to organize my world building ideas, my various novel ideas, and also I use it as a task manager. So what I ended up doing is using an Obsidian plugin called Longform to break up all of the different potential scenes in my outline into separate, organized notes that were in order so I could parse them more easily. And you can basically use this to write a book. It's kind of like turning Obsidian into Scrivener, kind of. I'm honestly not really a fan of Scrivener. I have tried it out before, but somehow using Obsidian plus Longform really just made sense to me, and it started to really click in my brain. Seeing my notes organized in this way, there was such a relief that washed over me. I felt like this book was already real. So it's time to answer the question. Was I done the outline?
The criteria that I laid out at the beginning for this project there were 3 of them. All subsections of the take off your pants outline should be filled in, which they are, even if they are not sketched out. The story should feel satisfying and whole, and I think as of this morning it does. Before the third act, really, there were some big question marks, but now I think I've really filled those in. There's just 1 or 2 things that I'm not totally clear on, and that's a world building issue. It's more about what exact weapon injection, what exact thing they're going to use to defeat the enemy through some sort of MacGuffin that I think I've narrowed down to 1 or 2 things. So I'm gonna say that's done. And the third thing is that the story must be compelling enough to make me want to write it. And yeah, it does. I've sketched out a pretty interesting story here, and I think the only thing that I have left to do is do a little bit more in-depth world building on sort of the Myr society, and I've started that process. I have to get more specific on the specific technologies that they have, and they are quite technologically advanced. I don't have, you know, specific names for the tech that they're using. But yeah, I have a complete story with the villain and twists and turns and a mystery, and yeah, I think it's ready to go on to the next phase, which is writing and filling in all those world building gaps. So I'm pretty excited to do that.
Everything that I write is an inevitable mirror reflected 1,000 times upon my life. I couldn't plot the story without talking about my existential dread and frustration that comes with not knowing if you're going to live. I can't film this video and not talk about my surgeries and my treatment and the havoc that it wreaked on my body and my mind, because it's all tied together as part of my creative process. Mermaid stories are about the transformation of the body and the soul. The mermaid has an ordinary life but wants more, and she realizes that she can fix her problems by changing her body. The reality is, if I hadn't gone to the doctor when I did, I might be making a very different video for you right now. Gynecological cancers have very nebulous symptoms, and it is very easy to dismiss the body's warning signs. I know that from the stats of my channel that it's very likely, if you're watching this, you might not have ovaries or a uterus, but maybe someone you love does. Going to the doctor when you think that it's nothing can be an inconvenience, but even though I was crying on the bathroom floor because of pain, I was still convinced that nothing was really wrong with me. I was living under the misconception that everything that I was feeling was just a normal part of being a woman. But it wasn't normal. You can ask for help and transform your body and your mind. The price is that you get to experience a part of humanity that very few others have ever seen. And the reward that you get at the end is clarity and hopefully a body that you can use. As I am filming this, I have just finished my 6th round of chemotherapy, and I am nearly done 28 consecutive weekdays of radiation. More transformation to the body. After that, I will be very closely monitored for recurrence as I continue my immunotherapy sessions. And I get to live to tell more stories. Knock on wood. Way to go, Claire! Woo!